"I'm sorry, sir. There are no rooms available tonight." The woman behind the front desk said it calmly, professionally, without a single word of apology underneath the polite one. And the tall man standing on the other side of the polished wood, water still dripping from the brim of his cap, did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for his phone to call a lawyer or a manager or anyone else. He just stood there, quiet, still, and let the words settle in the air between them, because he knew something she did not know that he knew. The hotel she had just told him was full was, at that exact moment, sitting at 61% occupancy, 47 empty rooms across 8 floors. He had checked the number himself from the back of the cab, 20 minutes earlier, on the hotel's own management system. And there was one more thing she did not know. The man she had just turned away into the rain, the nobody in the soaked hoodie and the worn jeans, was not a nobody at all. He owned the building, every floor, every room, every brick, including the desk she was standing behind. His name was Michael Jordan. And he had just walked into the Rowan Grand Hotel in Wilmington, North Carolina, for the very first time, on a cold and rainy Thursday night, into a building he had quietly owned for 4 months, and never once seen, only to be told, to his face, that there was no place for him inside it. What he would uncover over the next 48 hours inside that hotel was not simply bad management. It was something colder than that, something deliberate. But to understand what he found, and with every reason in the world to make a scene, chose instead to go silent and start watching. Cap, you have to go back to who he really was, to why he was standing in that lobby at all, and to a single promise his father had once asked him to keep. Michael Jordan had learned a long time ago that if you dressed like a nobody, people treated you like one. And most nights, that was exactly what he wanted. No entourage, no advance team, no assistant calling ahead to make sure the towels were folded the right way and the lobby smelled like fresh flowers. Just a man moving through the world at eye level, seeing it the way ordinary people actually saw it. He had grown up 11 blocks from the corner where the Rowan Grand stood. This was the city where his hands had first learned the weight of a basketball, where he had wanted something so badly he was willing to bleed for it. Wilmington. The river, the salt air, the old gym. Most of the city never thought about it, but the man who had put its name on every basketball map in the world had come from a street just a few minutes' walk from that hotel's front door. He had bought the Rowan Grand 4 months earlier, quietly, the way he preferred to do everything, through a holding company called Harbour Line Holdings. No press release, no ribbon cutting. Just paperwork, a wire transfer, and a handshake with the man he had chosen to run it, a general manager named Elijah Foster, an old friend from his Chicago years. Careful, loyal, exactly the kind of person you trusted with something that mattered. He had meant to visit in person. He really had. But the Hornets front office had needed him in Charlotte. Then a board meeting in New York ran 2 days long. Then a flight was delayed, then delayed again. And somehow 4 months slipped past without a single walkthrough of a building he legally owned. There was a reason the hotel mattered to him more than any balance sheet could explain. His father had walked past this building 100 times. And his father had told him once, in the unhurried way he said the things that were meant to last, that a man ought to own a piece of the place that made him. Not as a trophy, as a responsibility. This hotel was that piece. Buying it had felt, in a quiet way he never said out loud, like keeping a promise. What he did not know yet, standing out in the rain that Thursday night, was that the man who had sold it to him had built a trap into the sale, and had been counting on him staying away. Tonight at last, he was fixing the part he could see. He was coming home to the building. Which brings us back to that rainy Thursday night. The rain came in sideways off the Cape Fear River, the cold kind that finds the gap at your collar and settles there. A little before 10, Michael stood on the sidewalk outside the Rowan Grand, one hand on the handle of a single carry-on bag, and looked up at the building. 12 stories of pale stone and arched windows, a green awning over the entrance with the hotel's name in gold lettering, though the light on the left side had burned out, leaving half the letters in shadow. 2 doormen in navy coats flanked the doors. Neither of them looked up from their phones. Neither looked twice at the man in the rain. That was the point. He noticed the cracked tile on the second step. He noticed the burned-out awning light. He noticed the smudge on the glass of the revolving door that no one had wiped since morning. Small things. But small things add up, and small things are almost always the first place the truth shows itself. He pushed through the revolving door and stepped into the lobby. Inside it was warmer, and at first glance it looked fine. Marble floors. A chandelier throwing light in that way hotel chandeliers are supposed to, the way that tells you the place is important. A long front desk of dark polished wood. A handful of guests drifting through. A couple with luggage heading for the elevators. A businessman murmuring into his phone. Michael stood still a moment and let the room speak to him. He had a habit of doing that, and what the room told him under the polish was that this was a hotel running on the memory of what it used to be. The chandelier was impressive and dusty. The marble was buffed to a shine down the centre where guests walked and dull grey at the edges where nobody bothered. On the central table sat an arrangement of lilies, fresh white blooms on top, but the stems below the waterline were browning in cloudy water that had not been changed in days. He had seen this before in businesses and in people. The performance of quality without the substance of it. It is one of the first things that goes when a place is being quietly starved from the inside. Not the grand gestures, the small invisible maintenance that no guest ever notices until the day it is all gone at once. He rolled his bag toward the desk. There was one clerk on duty, a woman in her early 30s in a sharp dark blazer, her hair pulled back tight, a name tag that read Diane Colwell, Guest Services Manager. She was typing quickly and did not look up as he approached. He waited. She kept typing. 7 full seconds passed before she raised her eyes, and when she did, her gaze moved across his face the way people size up a stranger in an airport, cataloguing, assessing, filing him away as no one worth the effort. "Good evening," she said. "Name on the reservation?" "Jordan, Michael Jordan," she typed. Her fingers paused, then typed again slower. "I'm not finding a reservation under that name, sir." "Do you have a confirmation number?" "I don't. I didn't make a formal reservation." He paused. "I own the hotel." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Diane Colwell blinked once. Then the professional smile came back tighter than before. "Sir," she said, with the patient tone of someone explaining a rule to a child, "the Rowan Grand is owned by Harbourline Holdings. That's a private investment company, not an individual. I control Harbourline Holdings." "I understand," she said, in a voice that made it very clear she did not believe him at all. "Unfortunately, without a reservation, and given that we're nearly at capacity this evening." "Nearly at capacity," Michael repeated. "Yes, sir." He let that sit, because he knew in exact numbers that it was not true. Every hotel runs on one figure above all others, the percentage of rooms sold against rooms available. It drives the pricing, the staffing, and the story that management tells the people who own the place. The Rowan Grand was at 61% that night. 47 empty rooms. He had seen it with his own eyes 40 minutes ago. He knew it. She did not know he knew it. He watched her the way he used to watch a defender at the top of the key, reading the small tells. The weight shifting to 1 foot, the eyes drifting a fraction too far to the left. "Is there a manager on duty?" he asked. "Our duty manager is Mr. Grant Mercer. He's occupied with an operational matter, but I can leave him a message." "I'd rather speak with Elijah Foster." "He's the general manager." Something crossed her face, not quite surprise. More like the careful arranging of an expression built to reveal nothing. "Mr. Foster is no longer with the hotel, sir. Mr. Mercer is our acting general manager now." Michael went very still. Elijah Foster was gone, and no one had told him, no one had called, no one had sent a single message flagged urgent to the holding company he ran. His general manager, the man he had personally chosen, background checked, and trusted completely, had been removed from a hotel that Michael Jordan owned and Michael Jordan was learning about it right now at 9:52 on a rainy Thursday night, standing at the front desk of his own property while a clerk told him there was no room for him. He kept his face perfectly neutral. He had decades of practice at that. "I see," he said quietly. "I'll still need a room for tonight." "As I said, sir, we're quite full. You're at 61%. The silence that followed was a different kind than the ones before it. Diane Colwell's fingers went still above the keyboard. Her chin lifted a little. "I'm not sure where you're getting that number," she said. "From the hotel's own occupancy system," Michael said. "The same system that shows 47 vacant rooms across 8 floor categories as of 40 minutes ago." A couple standing nearby stopped their quiet conversation. The businessman was no longer looking at his phone. Diane's jaw tightened, almost too small to see, and for just a second the polished courtesy in her eyes gave way to something colder. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. I haven't raised it," which was true. His voice had never once climbed above the level of an ordinary conversation. It never did. She straightened. "I can give you the name of a Hampton Inn on Market Street. They usually have rooms on weeknights." "I'm not going to the Hampton Inn." He nodded toward a cluster of armchairs near the tall windows. "I'm going to sit in my lobby and make a few calls. I'd appreciate it if someone let Mr. Mercer know I'd like to speak with him whenever he's free." He turned before she could answer and walked to the chairs. From that seat he could see the whole room. The front desk, the elevator bank, the mouth of the restaurant off to the right, a door marked staff only at the far end of the east wall. He sat with his back straight, cap still on, bag beside his knee, and he did the thing he had always done in unfamiliar places. He watched. That is when he saw her. A woman in her late 20s in a housekeeping uniform, pushing a linen cart through the staff door. She moved fast, head down, the way people move when they are behind and afraid of being behind. The cart's wheel caught a ridge in the marble and lurched sideways, and a stack of folded towels toppled and fanned out across the floor. She gasped and dropped to her knees at once, gathering them up quickly. Her face flushed with the particular embarrassment of someone who lives in fear of one more mistake. 2 guests stepped around her without a glance, as though she were a piece of furniture that had fallen over. From the front desk, Diane Colwell looked at the mess and then looked away. Michael stood up. He crossed to where the woman was still crouched, bent down, and picked up the last 3 towels from the marble. He held them out. She looked up, startled, then confused, and then something else entirely as she registered how tall the man standing over her actually was. "Thank you," she said carefully, taking the towels. "No problem. Long shift, a pause. 14 hours, she added before she could stop herself. Then she shook her head slightly, as if she had said too much to a stranger. "I'm sorry to hear that." He meant it. Her name tag read Nia Braxton. She looked at him for one more second, really looked, the way people do when something is familiar but they cannot place it, and then she loaded the towels back onto the cart and pushed it through the staff door. Michael sat back down. What none of them knew, what the clerk at the desk did not know, and the guests stepping around a kneeling woman did not know, was that the quiet man in the baseball cap had been watching every single thing. The burned-out light, the browning stems, the occupancy numbers, the missing general manager, and now a housekeeper working a 14-hour shift in a hotel charging $247 a night, and he was only just getting started. 20 minutes later, a man appeared from the corridor behind the desk. Mid-40s, pressed shirt, a silver tie, hair that had clearly cost him effort in front of a mirror. He crossed the lobby with the particular walk of a person who believes a room changes when he enters it. His eyes found Michael with a fraction too much deliberateness, and he came straight over. "Mr. Jordan." The handshake was firm in a way that announced itself. "Grant Mercer, acting general manager. I understand there's been some confusion about a reservation." "No confusion," Michael said. "I own this hotel and I'd like a room." Mercer smiled with his mouth. "Of course. I've already spoken with Diane. We're going to take care of you right away." We have a very comfortable room on the 9th floor. I'd like to see Elijah Foster's office first." The smile stayed. The eyes went flat. "Mr. Foster is no longer. I know. I'd like to know who made that decision." "It was a personnel matter, handled through the proper channels. I wasn't informed. These decisions fall within the operational authority of—" "Of whom?" Michael asked. His voice never rose. "Who has operational authority over personnel at a property owned by Harbour Line Holdings?" Mercer adjusted his tie. It was a small gesture, but it told Michael everything he needed to know. "Why don't we get you settled into your room?" Mercer said, "and in the morning we can sit down and go through all of that." "That works," Michael said pleasantly, standing and picking up his bag. "I'll take the room. And I'll want a full staff directory, the last 12 months of profit and loss statements, every vendor contract signed in the past 6 months, and all the documentation on Elijah Foster's separation. On the desk in my room by 7 a.m. Mercer's smile had stopped working entirely. He opened his mouth, closed it, and finally said, in a voice stripped of its earlier warmth, "I'll see what I can do. Thank you, Grant." He followed the bellhop to the elevators. As the doors slid shut, Michael stood alone in the mirrored car and looked at his own reflection. Baseball cap, dark hoodie, worn jeans. A man nobody had looked at twice when he walked in from the rain. Somewhere above him, someone had fired Elijah Foster and never told the owner. Somewhere in the accounting files were vendor contracts that had not existed 4 months ago. Somewhere in this building, exhausted people were working double shifts in a hotel at 61% capacity, while management reported a story that did not match the numbers. He was not angry. Anger was noise, and noise got in the way of seeing clearly. What he felt was quieter than anger, and a great deal more dangerous. He felt certain. The room on the 9th floor was fine. Clean sheets, working air conditioning, a window that looked out over the dark ribbon of the Cape Fear River. Michael sat on the edge of the bed with his jacket still on and called Elijah Foster. It rang 7 times. No answer. He tried again. Same result. "Elijah, it's Michael. Call me when you can. It's urgent." Then he sat with the phone in his lap and listened to the hotel. That was another old habit, listening to a building the way you would listen to a patient's breathing. The low hum of the ice machine down the hall. A television murmuring through the wall. The elevator doors opening and closing 2 floors up. Every hotel has a sound at night, and if you pay attention, you can hear when something in the breathing is wrong. Something here was wrong. At 6:49 the next morning, before the light had fully come up over the river, Michael was already dressed and moving. He did not take the elevator. He took the stairs, all of them, slowly, stopping on each landing to push open the corridor door just far enough to see down the hallway. 3rd floor. A ceiling tile stained a dark brown the size of a dinner plate, the unmistakable mark of a leak ignored long enough to become permanent. A wall sconce with a shattered bulb that someone had not replaced but taped over, actually taped over, with blue painter's tape. 5th floor. A housekeeping card abandoned in the middle of the hallway, with a handwritten note stuck to it, "Out of clean linens." Management notified 10:19. Below it, a date. It was 2 days old, 7th floor, 2 guests standing outside their room in bathrobes, waiting. One of them caught Michael's eye. "Hot water's out," the man said, with the flat exhaustion of someone who has already complained twice and given up expecting anything. "They said maintenance would come. That was an hour ago." Michael nodded. He took out his phone and photographed the note on the linen card. He photographed the taped-over bulb. He noted floor numbers and times in a quiet voice memo as he moved. By the time he reached the lobby at 7:31, he had documented 17 separate problems across 6 floors of a hotel charging $247 a night. He found a corner table in the restaurant, a place the menu called the River Room, and ordered black coffee and eggs. The coffee came fast. The eggs took 22 minutes and arrived cold. The server, a young man whose name tag read Marcus Bell, looked genuinely pained as he set the plate down. "I'm so sorry about the wait," he said. He had the look of someone who apologized constantly. Not because he was careless, but because the system he worked inside gave him nothing else to offer. "How long have you been here?" Michael asked. 4 years. A small, tired smile. "Used to love this job." He caught himself, as if he had said something he should not have in front of a guest. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" "Sit down for a second." The young man hesitated. Michael gestured to the chair across from him. Marcus sat on the very edge of it, the posture of a person who expects to be called away at any moment. Michael asked simple questions. What had changed in the last few months? What the staff talked about when the managers were not around? Whether anyone knew why Elijah Foster had left? Marcus glanced toward the restaurant entrance. Then he leaned in. "Mr. Foster didn't leave," he said quietly. "He was pushed out. About 4 months ago, right after the hotel changed hands. New management came in, Mercer and 2 others, and within 3 weeks Mr. Foster was gone. They called it a restructuring, but everybody knew. Knew what? That he was asking questions somebody didn't want answered. About the new vendor contracts, about the maintenance budget getting cut in half, about supplies going missing." He paused, and something honest and frightened moved across his face. "We all knew something was wrong, but what are you going to do? You need the job." Michael sat with that a moment. "Thank you," he said. He meant it the same way he had meant it to Nia Braxton the night before. Plainly, without performance. Marcus stood, took 2 steps back toward the kitchen, then turned around. "Are you going to do something about it?" he asked. "Yes," Michael said. The young man held his eyes for a second, nodded once, and walked away. Michael left a tip several times the size of the check, and took the elevator down to the basement. Because Elijah Foster had finally texted back at 6:15 that morning, while Michael was standing on the 3rd-floor landing. "I've been trying to reach Harbour Line for weeks. Nobody picks up. I have documentation, everything. Tell me where you are." Michael had sent him an address and a time. Elijah Foster arrived at the service entrance at 9:03, carrying a laptop bag and looking like a man who had not slept well in months. They met in a storage room in the basement, between towers of boxed supplies and stacks of folded banquet tables. Foster was 53, compact, with the quiet intensity of a person who had spent 2 decades turning failing properties into profitable ones. Michael had hired him because he trusted the man's eye. He trusted it now, watching Foster open the laptop on a stack of boxes and pull up files with the certainty of someone who had been waiting a long time for exactly this conversation. "Start from the beginning," Michael said. Foster did. The sale had closed in June to Harbour Line Holdings, Michael's company. And within 8 days of closing, Foster had begun receiving instructions from a property management firm he had never heard of, a company called Ashford Holdings. The instructions came through Grant Mercer, who had been installed as an operations liaison before Foster had even been formally introduced to the new ownership structure. The first sign was the vendor contracts. 3 of the hotel's long-standing suppliers for linens, for kitchen provisions, for maintenance equipment had been quietly replaced with new companies offering worse products at prices 20% above the market rate. When Foster questioned it, Mercer told him the decision had come from ownership. "I tried to reach Harbour Line directly," Foster said. "The main number went to voicemail. Every email I sent got an automated reply. Someone was making sure I couldn't get to you." The second sign was the maintenance budget, cut by 61% in the second month. Foster escalated in writing. What he got back was a memo informing him that the hotel was entering a restructuring phase and that all capital spending was frozen. The third sign was the inventory. Kitchen supplies logged as received but nowhere in stock. Linens logged as in service but untraceable to any room. Bar inventory draining faster than the guest count could possibly explain. Someone was stealing, Foster said, slowly enough that a casual audit would never catch it, but not slowly enough to escape a man who was actually watching. 2 days after he submitted a formal written report about all of it, Elijah Foster received his termination notice. Restructuring. His access card stopped working that same evening. Michael listened to every word without interrupting. When Foster finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Ashford Holdings," he said. "Who owns it?" Foster turned the laptop to face him. The registered owner of Ashford Holdings LLC, incorporated in Delaware, was a man named Gerald Ashford. Michael sat back and let the name settle. That specific weight that comes when a thing you suspected turns out to be exactly what you feared. Gerald Ashford had owned the Rowan Grand for 11 years before selling it. He had come to Michael's acquisition team about 18 months ago, pitching the property hard. Too hard, in hindsight. The deal had closed quickly. Too quickly. And buried inside the sale contract, in Section 14, Paragraph 8, was a confidentiality clause that kept the identity of the new owner private for 12 months. Which meant that for 12 months, officially, nobody knew who owned the Rowan Grand. And Gerald Ashford had used every single one of those months. "He sold me the hotel," Michael said slowly, "so he could keep running it." Foster nodded, through Mercer, through the fake vendor contracts. "He's been pulling value out of the property and driving down its condition at the same time. When the confidentiality clause expires and your ownership becomes public, the hotel will be in bad enough shape that I'll want to unload it at a loss," Michael finished. "And he buys it back through Ashford Holdings for less than he sold it to me for." Foster said nothing. He did not need to. What neither of them said out loud was the other layer underneath it. Because Gerald Ashford had known what the Rowan Grand meant to the man he sold it to. He had known when he made the deal. He had known that Michael's roots were 11 blocks away, that his father had walked past this building, that buying it had been the keeping of a promise. And he had sold it to him anyway, with a trap already built inside, precisely because he was betting that a man that busy, that far away, would never come close enough to look. That bet, the choice to keep pulling the strings instead of simply selling and walking away, would end up costing Gerald Ashford everything. Michael took out his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to his lawyer in Charlotte, Vivian Sinclair. The second was to a private auditing firm he had used twice before. He gave both of them the same instruction: quiet, fast, thorough, documentation ready by tomorrow morning. Then he looked at Foster. "Can you get into your old office?" Foster held up a key card. "They killed my system access, but this still opens the physical lock. Nobody ever changed the cylinder." "Good. I need everything in your files. Emails, contracts, the maintenance reports, all of it." Foster closed the laptop and zipped the bag with the efficiency of a man who had been ready for this moment for a very long time. They left the storage room separately. That afternoon, 3 more people found their way to Michael one at a time in the quiet corners of the hotel where a conversation could not be overheard. They came because Elijah Foster had made a few careful calls of his own. The first was Nia Braxton, the housekeeper from the night before. She sat across from him in an empty second-floor meeting room, her hands folded on the table, and she spoke slowly, the way people speak when they have been afraid for a long time and are deciding right there in the moment whether to stop. She had worked at the Rowan Grand for 6 years. Under the old ownership it had not been perfect, but it had been a real job. Wages on time, schedules posted 2 weeks out, equipment that worked. In the 4 months since the sale, she had watched her department lose 4 people, 2 fired and 2 who simply quit from exhaustion. Her supply budget had been cut so severely that on 3 separate occasions she had bought cleaning supplies with her own money rather than leave a guest room unserviced. $37 in all. She had kept the receipts. She laid them on the table, 3 crumpled slips of paper smoothed flat. "I thought the new owner just didn't care," she said. "We all thought that. Nobody ever told us any different." She looked at him steadily. "Are you really the owner?" "Yes." She held his gaze for a long moment, and something shifted in her face. Not relief, exactly. More like the specific dignity of a person who has been lied to for months, and is finally being told the truth. "Thank you for telling me," she said. The second was Curtis Boyd, the head of maintenance. 41, built wide, carrying the particular exhaustion of a man asked to do professional work with dollar store tools. He set a handwritten log on the table. 43 maintenance requests submitted since June, 17 completed, 26 denied or ignored. He had kept every denial in writing, every work order, every parts request, every email from Mercer telling him to make do. "I knew nobody upstairs was reading these," Curtis said, tapping the log. "So I started keeping my own copy. Figured someday somebody would want to know the truth." The third was Grace Adeyemi, the hotel's accountant for the last 4 years, and the most careful of the three. She chose each word with precision. She told him about a string of vendor invoices she had flagged back in August, payments to Ashford Holdings subsidiaries for services she could not confirm had ever actually been delivered. When she escalated the discrepancy to Mercer, she received a formal written warning within 48 hours for overstepping her department's authority. She had not stopped keeping her own records. Michael sat with the three of them for an hour and 40 minutes. He listened to every word. He did not hand out reassurances he was not sure he could keep. He did not promise everything would be fine. He just listened, and at the end he said, "I'm going to need copies of everything you have, and I'm going to need you to be willing to say what you told me, in writing, to the right people." All three of them said yes. What Gerald Ashford had never understood, what men like him never understand, is that the floor staff of a hotel see everything. They move through every corridor, every back office, every service entrance. They hear conversations through walls. They carry information in their heads that no executive ever thinks to ask about. Ashford had spent 4 months treating them like furniture. He had no idea what they had quietly been building. Gerald Ashford arrived at the Rowan Grand at 10:17 the next morning. He came through the front entrance the way men like him always do, unhurried, proprietary, with the calm certainty of someone who believes he is the most important person in any room he walks into. 61 years old, silver hair, a charcoal blazer over an open collar. He crossed the lobby marble as if he still owned the floor beneath his shoes, which, in his own mind, he did. That was the whole problem with Gerald Ashford. He had never really let go. He was trailed by 2 men, associates or lawyers, hard to tell the difference. And half a step ahead of him, nearly trotting to keep pace, was Grant Mercer, whose whole posture broadcast the anxiety of a man who senses a performance review coming and is not at all sure he will pass. They were halfway across the lobby when Gerald Ashford stopped, because Michael Jordan was standing at the front desk, not sitting in an armchair, not eating cold eggs in a corner, standing at his full height, cap off, in a clean shirt with Elijah Foster on his left and a woman named Vivian Sinclater, senior partner at a Charlotte law firm, on his right. She had driven 3 hours that morning. On the desk between them sat a document binder 4 inches thick. The lobby was not empty. It was mid-morning, and guests were moving through, checking out, drifting toward breakfast. Several of them slowed when they sensed something happening. The front desk staff had quietly found reasons to be present. Diane Colwell stood at her station, very still. Gerald Ashford's face moved through several things in quick succession. Surprise, recalculation, and then, impressively fast, the rebuilding of his composure. "Michael," he said, spreading his hands slightly, the gesture of a man arriving at a pleasant social occasion. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us today." "Your walkthrough was scheduled for 10:15, Michael said. "I thought I'd be here for it." Something shifted behind Ashford's eyes. He glanced at Foster, then at the woman with the binder, then back at Michael. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Shall we find somewhere private?" "We're fine here." Michael let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then he laid his hand flat on the binder. Ashford Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware. Sole managing member Gerald Ashford. He paused. "You want to tell me about the vendor contracts, or should I start?" The composure held for one more moment. Grant Mercer had gone the colour of old plaster. One of the 2 men behind Ashford turned and walked back toward the entrance, phone already at his ear. "I don't know what you think you found," Ashford said, his voice dropping. the social warmth gone now, but property management involves. You redirected $73,000 in vendor payments to subsidiaries of your own company in 4 months, Vivian Sinclair said, without looking up from the binder. We have the invoices, the bank records, the formation documents for each subsidiary. She turned a page. We also have the termination file for Elijah Foster, which was processed through an Ashford Holdings email address rather than any Harbour Line account. That's either fraud or a very interesting coincidence. Those are serious allegations. They're documented facts, Michael said. His voice stayed level, the way it had always stayed level in the moments that actually mattered. You sold me this hotel with your own people already inside it. You cut my maintenance budget. You replaced my vendors with your own companies. You fired my general manager and blocked every channel I had to find out what was happening. And you did all of it because you thought a 12-month confidentiality clause gave you a year to run this place into the ground and buy it back for a fraction of what I paid you. Ashford looked at him for a long moment, and then something in him shifted, not to remorse, not to guilt, but to the cold recalculation of a man deciding which version of the story might still work. You're a basketball player, he said. And the contempt that had been underneath everything the whole time finally came out into the open. You bought this place as a trophy, a vanity project. You don't have the first idea what it takes to run a hotel. I know what it takes, Michael said quietly, to show up to work when the supplies never came in. I know what it takes to cover shifts for the people who quit because the schedule was impossible. I know what it takes to spend your own money on cleaning products because management won't sign the purchase order. He looked at Ashford steadily. Nia Braxton knows, Curtis Boyd knows, Grace Adeyemi knows. They've been doing it for 4 months, while you pulled $73,000 out of the building. Ashford's jaw tightened. I want to speak with my attorneys before. That's your right, Vivian Sinclair said. The Wilmington Police Department is aware of this situation and will be in contact. You're not being detained, but I'd strongly advise you not to leave the city. One of Ashford's remaining associates took him by the arm. He did not shake it off. For the first time since he had walked through the door, Gerald Ashford looked like exactly what he was. A 61-year-old man who had spent 4 months believing he was the smartest person in the deal and had just discovered, in front of an audience, that he was not. He walked toward the exit slowly, now, the proprietary stride gone out of him. At the door he stopped and turned back one last time. I built this hotel, he said. 11 years, everything in it. You have no idea what it meant to sell it. Michael looked at him across the length of the lobby. Then you should have taken better care of the people inside it. Gerald Ashford walked out into the grey October morning, and the door closed behind him. The lobby was silent for a full 3 seconds, and then someone began to applaud. It might have been Marcus Bell, standing in the restaurant doorway. It might have been someone else. Slowly at first, then others joining, a ripple moving through the staff and the guests, who had gathered without quite meaning to, until the sound filled the marble space and rang off the chandelier. Diane Colwell was not applauding. She was standing at her station, very still, her face working through something complicated. Michael walked over to her. She looked up, and her mouth opened and closed once before any words came. "Mr. Jordan," she said, "I owe you an apology. You were working with the information you had. I was rude to you. You were doing your job the way you'd been taught to do it." He paused. "The question is whether you'd like to learn a different way." She blinked. "Are you? I still have a job. If you want it." She stood up a little straighter. The rehearsed professional warmth was gone, and in its place was something more genuine, and a great deal more useful. "Yes," she said, "I want it." Grant Mercer, for the record, had vanished somewhere between Ashford's exit and the applause. A formal investigation would locate him 3 days later. He resigned before the process finished, gave up his severance, and cooperated just enough with the auditors to reduce his own liability. What he told them confirmed everything they already knew, and added details they had not. The full picture was worse than the documents alone had suggested. Vendor kickbacks totaling $94,700, the deliberate sabotage of 3 long-term guest relationships, and a scheduling strategy designed on purpose to burn out the senior staff most likely to ask questions. The Wilmington District Attorney opened a formal investigation 6 days after Ashford walked out of that lobby. His legal team filed 3 motions to delay. All 3 were denied. By December, he had agreed to a civil settlement with Harborline Holdings that included full restitution of the $94,700, a financial penalty on top of it, and a permanent bar on any ownership or management role in North Carolina hospitality for 15 years. He also issued a formal written apology. His lawyers drafted it. It was 3 paragraphs long and notably thin on specifics. Michael read it once, put it in a drawer, and never mentioned it publicly. What mattered more was what happened to the people who had stayed. Elijah Foster was reinstated as general manager with a new contract, an 18% raise, and a direct line of reporting to Michael that skipped every layer that had been used to silence him. His first official act was to authorize the full maintenance overhaul Curtis Boyd had been requesting for 4 months, 61 repair tickets. All of them. Curtis led the overhaul himself. It took 9 weeks. When it was done, the Rowan Grand passed its first full property inspection in over a year with a score of 96 out of 100. Nia Braxton was promoted to housekeeping supervisor. Her department went from 4 people to 9. Her supply budget was restored and increased. And the $37 she had spent out of her own pocket was reimbursed, with a handwritten note that read, simply, "Thank you for showing up when it mattered." Grace Adeyemi kept her position and was given the authority to flag any financial discrepancy directly to the general manager, and if necessary, to Michael himself. She used that authority twice in the following year. Both times she was right. Marcus Bell, the server who had told the truth over a plate of cold eggs, was promoted to manager of the River Room 6 months later. Under him, the restaurant won a regional dining award. He printed out the review and taped it to the inside of his office door. And Curtis Boyd's handwritten log, the one with 43 requests and 26 denials, the one he had kept because he figured someday somebody would want the truth. Michael had it framed, not hidden in an archive, framed and hung on the wall of the staff corridor, right where every employee passed it on the way to their shift. Underneath it, a small brass plate read, "Kept by the people who would not let this place die." He wanted it there for the same reason his father had wanted him to own a piece of the place that made him, so that no one who walked past it would ever forget that the building had been held together, in its worst months, by people whose names no one in charge had bothered to learn. 1 year after the rainy night, when a tall man in a baseball cap was told there was no room, the Rowan Grand held its official reopening. The ballroom held 240 guests, local business leaders, city council members, former staff who had left during the worst of it and come back when word spread about what had changed. Michael arrived without fanfare, a dark blazer this time, no cap, no carry-on. He walked through the lobby and stopped for a moment in the centre of the marble floor and looked at the room the way he had looked at it a year before, but differently now. The chandelier was clean. The flowers were fresh all the way down to the stems. The floor was polished edge to edge. Small things, but small things add up. At 8 o'clock he stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. He had thought carefully about what he wanted to say, and in the end he said less than people expected. "I grew up 11 blocks from this corner," he said. "I walked past this hotel 100 times before I ever walked through the front door. My father told me once that a man ought to own a piece of the place that made him." He paused. "I think what he meant was that ownership isn't about the deed. It's about responsibility to the people inside the building, to the community outside it, to the work that goes into making a place worth coming back to." He gestured to the staff standing along the walls of the ballroom. These are the people who kept this hotel alive when someone was actively trying to kill it. They did it without recognition, without the resources they needed, and without knowing whether anyone in charge would ever notice. He let that sit. I noticed I was just late getting here. A pause. I won't be late again. The applause lasted a long time. Later, after the speeches and the dinner and the photographs, when the ballroom had thinned to a few dozen people still holding glasses and talking softly, Michael walked out alone onto the fourth-floor terrace. The October air was cool and damp off the river, the same air as the night he had arrived. Below him the city moved in its ordinary Friday rhythm. Cars on the bridge, the neon of the waterfront restaurants, the dark water of the Cape Fear carrying the light in broken pieces. He thought about his father, and about what it meant to come home to a place that had forgotten you were ever from there. He thought about the particular small cruelty of being made invisible in a place you love. And then he thought about Nia Braxton on her knees on the marble, gathering towels while guests stepped around her as if she were not there. About Marcus Bell apologizing for cold eggs in a voice worn thin by months of apologizing for things that were never his fault. About Curtis Boyd's log, 43 requests, 26 denied, each denial kept in a folder because he had learned not to trust that anyone was paying attention. None of them had been born to be invisible. They had been made invisible, on purpose, by a man who believed that people without titles were interchangeable and replaceable, and finally unimportant. He had been wrong about that, completely, permanently wrong. And the proof was the sound drifting up from the ballroom behind him. The sound of a group of people who had been told, for months, that they did not matter, discovering that they did. Michael stood on the terrace a while longer. Then he went back inside. Here is the part worth carrying with you after the lights in that ballroom go down. We have all stood at a counter somewhere and felt invisible. We have all watched someone get dismissed because they did not look important enough to matter. And most of us, at one time or another, have wondered quietly whether telling the truth was worth the risk. The people who saved that hotel were not powerful. They had no titles worth fearing, no leverage, no way to force anyone to listen. What they had was smaller and stronger than all of that. They had the truth written down and kept on crumpled receipts and in a handwritten log, and the courage to tell it out loud when someone finally asked. That turned out to be enough to bring down a man who thought he had thought of everything. So, here is the question the story leaves in your hands. When you walk into a room, whose name do you bother to learn? The person who cleans it, who fixes it, who carries your bags and refills your coffee, the person everyone else steps around, is watching how you treat them, and one day it may matter more than you could ever guess. Because dignity was never a reward handed down to the important. It is a basic right, owed to every single person in the building, no matter what they are wearing or what their name tag says. And the smallest act of noticing, the choice to see a person that everyone else has decided not to see, can be the thing that changes everything. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, think of the one person in your own life who keeps things running and never gets thanked for it, and go tell them today. And if you would like to hear more stories like this one, stay with us. There is always another one coming.